Listen to the voices of the advocates.
Welcome to a special two-part audio and video episode of Advocates the Podcast. Recently, Advocates the Podcast had the privilege of recording two very special interviews which reunited the advocates who acted for Tun Salleh Abas and the 5 suspended judges in 1988. We at Advocates the Podcast must thank Endeavour Group Law Practice, Endeavour Advocacy Project, Lim Chi Partnership and Ramat Lim Partners for having sponsored the event, which was held on 22nd May 2025 at the Glass Box in the Met Corporate Towers in Kuala Lumpur. For part one, we were privileged to assemble Team Salleh Abas, comprising Cyrus, Varghese George, Tommy Thomas, Darryl Goon, with answers to questions sent to us also by Horace Royan. All of them spoke about the dramatic events of 1988. For Team 5 judges, Razlan Hadri and Alex De Silva had the company of another stellar cast of Wong Chong-Wah, Cecil Abraham, Wilfred Abraham, Lucy Chang, Arif Yusuf, Robert Lazar, and Philip Coe. We hope you'll enjoy both episodes.
And it's now time for the main event. In this first interview, we will be speaking to Team Tun Salleh Abas. These 5 advocates were part of the legal team which acted for the former Lord President of the Supreme Court of Malaysia, whose dismissal from the post in 1988 triggered a constitutional crisis and changed the course of Malaysian legal history. We are honored to have them here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Tan Sri Tommy Thomas, Tan Sri Thomas is a consultant to Tommy Thomas Advocates and Solicitors. He previously served as the Attorney General of Malaysia between 2018 and 2020, and as a barrister of some 45 years standing. Tan Sri Tommy has had the privilege of appearing as counsel in landmark cases in various branches of the law in all the courts of Malaysia, including the Privy Council in London. He has authored several books, including his 2021 memoir, My Story, Justice in the Wilderness. Next, we have Dato Darryl Goon. Dato Darryl is a consultant to Raja Darryl and Low and a founding member of the firm. He was elevated to the bench in 2018 and served as a member of the Judiciary until his retirement from the Court of Appeal in 2022. In addition to the pivotal events of 1988 being discussed here tonight, he has appeared in landmark cases in the fields of inter alia, intellectual property, medical negligence, and defamation over his 40-plus years career at the bar. We also have joining us tonight Datuk Dr. Cyrus Das. Dato Cyrus is a senior advocate at practice in the Malaysian Bar and is a past president of the Malaysian Bar Council as well as a past president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. He is presently the chairman of the Law Asia Constitutional and Rule of Law Committee and honorary life president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. He was also the founding president for the Malaysian Society for Labour and Social Security Law. Next up, we have Dato Varghese George. Dato Varghese is a retired judge of the Court of Appeal and was a litigator with Messrs. Zain & Co. Advocates and Solicitors right here in Kuala Lumpur for 35 years before being appointed a judicial commissioner in November 2009. He was elevated in August 2011 as a judge of the High Court in Malaya and subsequently to the nation's Court of Appeal in September 2013. Dato Varghese retired in January 2017 and has since been a full-time arbitrator and adjudicator involved in adjudication matters and a variety of arbitration, both domestic and international. He is also an accredited mediator. This interview will be conducted by Gopal Sreenevasan and Kwan Wilson. Gopal needs no introduction, but I will introduce him anyway. He is the co-founder of Endeavour Group Law Practice, the pioneering barristers' chambers in Malaysia. Unlike traditional law firms, Endeavour's advocates only act as instructed counsel and often reverse instruct solicitors in disputes and arbitrations in Malaysia and in other countries. With a legal career spanning 30 years and counting, Gopal is a highly respected advocate who has made a significant impact in the field of law across multiple jurisdictions. Spurred by a passion for nurturing legal talent, especially in advocacy, he started the Endeavour Advocacy Project, which my co-MC Shah can tell you all about if you hunt him down later. Gopal is also the co-host of Advocates, the podcast. So as these evening's interviews will be featured on future episodes, all of you here can now say you've been on an episode of Advocates, the podcast. And introducing Wilson next. He has over 16 years of experience in corporate and commercial litigation. He is a founding partner of Lim Chi Wee Partnership, which is a boutique dispute resolution firm focusing on commercial litigation, international arbitration, fraud, and asset recovery. Wilson was also part of the Bar Council's counsel team for the VK Lingam case, participating in proceedings from the initial disciplinary hearings through to the federal court, which resulted, as we all know, in VK Lingam being struck off the role of advocates and solicitors. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And Gopal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hedi. Thank you, Shah. And yes, that was a nice way to finish up that introduction, given the topic we're speaking about tonight. So firstly, can I say thank you all for coming here today for this very special live event, sponsored by Endeavour GLP, the Endeavour Advocacy Project, Lim Chi Wee Partnership, and Rahmat Liman Partners, and of course carried by Advocates, the podcast. Now, I see that looking around the room that this event has drawn some mild interest, and I'm happy for that. But frankly, that is no surprise given the legal firepower assembled in this room to speak to you about so important a chapter in Malaysia's history. But before we begin the really interesting part, I would like to spend just 5 minutes dealing with the format you should expect, and then followed by just setting the stage for the 2 sets of interviews that you are going to hear from these outstanding advocates. The format is simple enough. Wilson and I will interview the team Salleh Abas for about 45 minutes, and then that will be followed by a Q&A. Then the 5 judges will take the stage for the same process. 5 judges team, will take the stage for the same process and be interviewed by Razlan Hadri and Alex De Silva. Now, let me say up front that the drawback of this format is that although we have assembled pretty much the whole team for both panels, it must necessarily follow that we will not get to hear from every one of them as much as we would like during the interviews. That, I suppose, is the price of success. But we do have drinks and bites after the event is over, and that will be your opportunity to be able to draw more from these gentlemen. Can I also say that when I started calling around all these guys to ask them to attend this interview and be part of this, everyone said yes immediately. And I think, that really speaks to their generosity of spirit. So much for format. What then of history? Let me set the stage for you before that fateful day on the 1st of May, 1988, when a royal command was issued to take action against the then Lord President Tun Salleh Abas. The wheels for this confrontation began turning, as far as we can see, in 1987, 1988. A series of decisions by the Malaysian courts were beginning to frustrate our then Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir. Amongst them were the Berthelsen case, the Dato Yap Peng case, and of course, Lim Kit Siang against UEM. All of which showed that our courts were willing to stand up to executive overreach and, well, simply apply the law. But Dr. Mahathir, much like the Iron Lady, was simply not for turning. At that time, of course, Dr. Mahathir was the first Malaysian Prime Minister who was not a lawyer. And at that time, he had, for himself at least, a healthy and perhaps medically induced disdain for the law and for those who applied it. This suspicion heightened when the fate of Dr. Mahathir as president of UMNO was before a 9-bench panel of the Supreme Court after Justice Harun Hashim had declared UMNO illegal on the 4th of February 1988. To pass Henry II, Dr. Mahathir in effect asked, "Who will rid me of these turbulent judges?" Characteristically, he decided he would do it himself. On the 18th of March 1988, he delivered an incendiary speech attacking the judiciary, in which he said that by possessing qualities termed as fiercely independent, these judges are indirectly involved in opposition politics. Astonishing, even by the events we see around the world today. That was a bridge too far for Tun Salleh Abas. He summoned an urgent meeting of the Supreme and High Court judges who were residing in Kuala Lumpur on the 25th of March, 1988, which resolved that a letter be written to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong protesting Dr. Mahathir's attacks. As we all know, this led to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong commanding Dr. Mahathir to take action against Tun Salleh on May Day, the 1st of May, 1988. The result of this was the suspension of Tun Salleh and the convening of a tribunal to hear charges of judicial misbehavior. The result, of course, was that he was dismissed. What I should also insert here is that these events occurred just 6 months after Dr. Mahathir's Ops Lalang, when in October of 1987, he had arrested and imprisoned, without trial, opposition leaders including Lim Kit Siang and Karpal Singh. Newspapers too were under attack, with the Star, for example, having its license suspended. It was a dark and frightening time for anyone who opposed Dr. Mahathir. But enough of the backdrop. What we propose now to do is to take you into the actual rooms where the battle for our judges was fought in the course of these 2 interviews. In our interviews with the members of the Tun Salleh Abas team, first and then for the 5 judges. From the Tun Salleh Abas team, we miss most of all the presence of that giant amongst men, Varghese Adrus. Zainal Zakaria was mustard keen to be here, but unfortunately had prearranged travel plans. Porus, Royan, had agreed to come, but unfortunately had a last-minute emergency. But in typical Porus fashion, he had answered the questions we'd asked of him in writing. He'd had his notes, and the stand-in for Porus Royan tonight is Alex De Silva. We are nothing if not inventive, right? Now, for the 5 judges team, they are all here this evening, except those who are sadly no longer with us. They are, of course, Binayak Pradhan, R.R. Sedu, Christopher Fernando, and Ghazi Ishaq. We miss them. Now, none of these advocates, in fact, when I was hearing Hedi's introduction, my thought was, why is she introducing these guys? They need no introduction. And therefore, I think we should turn swiftly and urgently to the questions we have for them. So the first one is for Dato Das. So, Dato, come the first week of June 1988, it was tolerably clear that there was going to be a clash between the head of the judiciary and the Prime Minister. At the time, did you imagine that it could lead to a tribunal and the removal of the Lord President And what were your immediate thoughts when you saw this brewing?
Very good evening to everyone. Thank you, Gopal. Thank you, Wilson, for inviting me to this forum. And I think we begin by paying tribute the leader of the legal team that represented Tun Salleh, the late Raja Aziz. Now, to answer your question, the setting up of the tribunal was somewhat inevitable. You'll recollect, if one has read the book by Tun Salleh, which he wrote together or co-authored with K. Das, the eminent journalist, called Mayday for Justice. And later, I think after his dismissal, he gave a tabulated account of the events leading to his dismissal in the lecture that he gave in UK, the John Galloway lecture, under the title of Independence of the Judiciary. Now, what Tun Salleh said in those books, and I think because we were not present when these things happened, was on the 27th of May, he was called in by the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, and told that offense has been taken to the letter he wrote on behalf of the judges to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and circulated to the Conference of Rulers or the Malay rulers. And he was asked to resign or to put in his early retirement. And he refused. But much more than that took place at the meeting. And there was a suggestion by Tun Salleh, which he has put it in his books, that Tun Mahathir said that you're showing bias in respect of the case of the UMNO 11, because that case had already been set for hearing by a full bench of the then Supreme Court on the 13th or 14th of June. And following that, very next day, or the day after, was set for hearing of the Gopal Singh habeas corpus case, because Gopal Singh had been released under Operation Lalang by a decision of Justice Pei Sui Chin in Ipoh. Those days, we didn't have the Court of Appeal, so the appeals went right up to the then Supreme Court. So the suggestion was that there was bias in the empanelling of the full bench of the then Supreme Court. And in any event, Tun Salleh left the Prime Minister's office, refusing to step down, and went back to his chambers. And when he went back to his chambers, around about 11 or 12 that morning, he received the letter of suspension. And in the letter of suspension was stated very clearly that a tribunal was being set up under Article 125. And well, what happened after that was a rather strange thing, in that Tun Salleh, after consulting with some persons, decided that he will voluntarily put in his letter of resignation, and that went in. And I think on further discussion, he retracted it.
Yes, that's right.
And after he retracted it, came the notice that a tribunal is going to be set up.
So it was
And,
inevitable.
so it was
from
inevitable
your
in that
point of
sense.
view.
And Tun Salleh himself, in his book, Mayday for Justice, said that executive action had been launched. He used the word, the juggernaut has been set in motion, and it was unstoppable.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Dato. Over to you, Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Now, at that point in time, I think we are already in early part of June 1988. Yeah, and I would imagine that this would be the time when the legal team would have been assembled. So my question is for Porus, or rather Alex, speaking on behalf of Mr. Porus Royan. Do you, or rather, would Mr. Porus Royan recall how was he approached? And what was his first reaction? And how was the legal team eventually put together?
I'm going to ask all of you to just imagine the distinguished gentleman called Porus Royan, and this is what he had to say. My recollection is that from the time, probably on or about 27th of May, Tun Salleh Abas contacted and consulted Raja Aziz in Param Kumaraswamy. He requested Raja Aziz to be his lead counsel and for Shuklin and Bok to be his solicitors. At some stage, Param contacted Anthony Lester QC, who agreed to be his counsel in the judicial review proceedings, subject to an ad hoc admission. Both Cyrus and I from Shuklin and Bok were co-opted into the team, and soon after, Varghese George, Zano Zakaria, Tommy Thomas, and Darryl Goon joined it.
Thank you very much, Porus. Very distinguished. The next question is to Dato Varghese George. And Dr. George, we know, of course, that Raja Aziz was lead counsel for Tun Salleh, but he obviously had a formidable legal team around him. So my question is about the dynamics of that team. What was the dynamics like, and did each of you have a distinct role?
First of all, thank you to the organizers who have put this event together, and good evening to everyone attending. This was the second time that I was working with Raja Aziz as a team, and I considered it to be a bar team, really, in the cause of justice for the country. And I had the one earlier episode in which I worked with him was the ISA Operation Lalang habeas corpus applications. That was much more, demanding on all of us. And I was called in. Now, as to the dynamics of the operations of this team, there were Raja Aziz was the leader. He couldn't be the general. There were other generals like Cyrus, Boris, and Tommy, who were the strategists. But my role was like a foot soldier, or the private, carrying the bag, looking after the documents, making sure that all the documents were properly, had their numbers, enclosure numbers, and so on. Finally, I ended up as a driver for the team as well. When we took the prohibition order to the Parliament House. So that was the dynamics of how we were. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. George.
You're most humble, Dr. Varghese George. Now, you mentioned strategy earlier on, and this is a question for Tan Sri Tommy Thomas. Once the tribunal was appointed and it was clear that Tun Hamid will be the chairman, and obviously the individual with the most to gain by reason of him being the chairman, the legal team would already have been assembled, and this is a situation without precedent. As the strategies, as Dr. Varghese George mentioned earlier on, how did the team develop a legal strategy to deal with something which is so utterly unprecedented?
Well, I think the unprecedentedness didn't trouble us too much. We knew it had to be a tribunal under the Constitution, but we were quite sure that Hamid's role would be clear. What we were not sure was whether he was going to be behind the scenes or coming out in open. So when the composition was announced and he came out as chairman, and that was quite blatant because you could have done it differently in our land of Ramayana and Sandiwara. But he came out openly, and we then decided, even those who were more optimistic in our team realized that there's no chance. And once the composition, and of course with the Singapore delegate, which is the hanging judge Sinadure, then somebody from Sri Lanka, neither jurisdiction famous for brave judges, neither producing Lord Atkin or Henningside. Because under the Constitution, it could have been judges from the UK or from Canada or from India, Commonwealth, but they chose what we would call the lesser Commonwealth. And insofar as judges were concerned. So I've not changed. So we knew it was going to be doomed. So the big question then was whether to participate or not. Yes. That was the question. When the result, it was a kangaroo court, you knew you were going to lose. And the debate went on for, I think, days. And then we finally decided to boycott. And once we decided to boycott, then we thought something about it.
DG, now over to you. Yes. Now, you were at the time the most junior at 5 years in practice. So I have two questions for you. The first is, do you know how you came to be asked to be on the team? What prompted them to ask you? That's the first. And the second was, what was the reaction of the partners in your firm at the time?
Well, if Varghese George was the foot soldier, it was probably Raja Aziz's Batman. I remember Unku, as we fondly call Rajas, is calling me up one day. Says, would you like to have lunch? Because Rajas was absolutely very polite, very gentle a man. So I said yes. I could never say no to Rajas. So we had lunch at the Lake Club as usual. And he explained the whole thing and asked if I would assist him. Of course, I found it very exciting and immediately said yes. But Unku was not have that answer taken straight away. He said, no. Think about it carefully, go back, and very ominously said that there may be implications. But I was pretty young. I didn't know what that meant. But anyway, I went back and I knew there was not going to be anyone in the firm to object to it because there was only Jennifer Chong and Loy Kwa at the time. And I went back to office and immediately called him back and said, I'll do it. No hesitation at all. Shortly thereafter, I met one of the senior partners of the firm, Datuk, later became deputy minister. And I asked him whether I made the right decision. His answer was very simple. I said, could you live with yourself if you didn't accept the brief? Well, that's it. I did. So that's how I.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Now we have the so-called 1988 Avengers team assembled. And just going back to what Tan Sri Tommy mentioned earlier on in terms of the strategy to potentially boycott the matter. Now my question for Dato Cyrus Das. Now the tribunal was due to commence sitting on 29th of June 1988 and ultimately completed the hearing on 30th of June, just one day after, on 30th of June 1988. Now, Tun Salleh Abas appeared on his own without legal representation at that time, and when he was refused an adjournment, he walked out. The question then is, what is the thinking behind that particular move by Tun Salleh Abas?
No, Wilson, you're wrong. Tun Salleh never appeared before the tribunal. In fact, on the 29th of June, which was the first sitting of the tribunal, Rajazis, myself, and Poros Royan went representing him. And Rajazis applied for the tribunal to be adjourned, the sitting of the tribunal, on the grounds that a writ of prohibition has been applied for in the High Court, and challenging the jurisdiction of the tribunal, challenging the composition of the tribunal, and in particular, challenging the procedure on which the tribunal was to function or operate. Because it was meant to be a judicial, if not quasi-judicial body, but they were sitting in a quorum of 5 when 6 were appointed. So someone could just walk in and out and not attend all the proceedings. So on those grounds, I remember distinctly, the 3 of us were there before the panel of 6, and Rajazis, in his usual very quiet manner, said that, look, you people need to adjourn. And they asked us to step out for a while, and then they deliberated among themselves, called us in less than 10 minutes, and said adjournment refused. And then Rajazis very politely said that our instructions from Tun Salleh is to leave the tribunal and not participate. So we walked out. And that afternoon, I remember distinctly Tun Salleh calling Rajazis and saying that, look, I've now received another letter from the tribunal. The chairman of, not the chairman, the secretary of the tribunal was a very nice man, Dr. Mazlan, very accommodative to us whenever we needed to liaise with him. And that letter said very clearly that the tribunal is proceeding the next day, that is the 30th of June, and that we are going to hear witnesses, and you are entitled to participate and cross-examine the witnesses. So the next day, Rajazis and myself went. Poros was not able to make it, like he's not able to make it today, fortunately. And so we went there, and Rajazis said that, look, we're not going to participate. Our instructions are not to participate. But, and he made it very clear that the reason why we were not participating, let me not go too much into the details of that. Yeah. So Tun Salleh did not appear before the tribunal at all.
Okay. I stand corrected, yes.
It was us.
The Tun Salleh Abas team, sorry.
Yes, and after we withdrew from the tribunal the second day, that was the last we saw of it until that fateful day when, driven by George Varghese, we went and delivered the stay order on the tribunal. And when they received it, they seemed very shocked. But there you are. I think you've got other questions here.
Yes. And I, in my mind's ear, I can just hear Unku in that voice saying, thank you, but we won't be here. Now, this is for Poros. On the 28th of June, the legal team filed an application in the High Court that Dato Das was just talking about, to restrain the tribunal from proceeding with the completion of its report. So my question is, why did the team think that there was more probability of success doing this than defending the charges at the tribunal?
Once again, distinguished look, sideburns, goatee. Okay, this is Porus's answer. Though there were views exchanged about whether Tun Salleh should defend the charges at the tribunal or apply for judicial review, it was Tun Salleh's decision that he would not appear before a tribunal as constituted. I have a very vivid recollection that Tun Salleh was never going to subject himself to the tribunal because he knew that the outcome had been decided.
Yes. Typically Porus, very short answers.
Dato Varghese George. Now, when we look back at the records, the application ended up before Justice Ajaib Singh. Could you tell us a little bit about the hearings before Justice Ajaib Singh?
This on. But before Justice Ajaib said it, we must remember this matter was fixed before another judge.
Oh.
And we were all in court on that morning. Yusuf Panjang. I didn't want to mention names, but when we all were there in court ready, even before the time fixed, so that we can proceed, because it's an urgent application. But we were kept waiting till about 11 something in the morning when we were told he's on medical leave and somebody else will be hearing the matter. And that's how the matter ended up with Justice Ajaib Singh. Even Justice Ajaib Singh, while he was sitting up on the bench, did not appear to be too interested in disposing of this application, which he knew was an urgent one, which we urged upon him was an urgent one. He kept on dilly-dallying, then had an adjournment, come back in the afternoon, adjournment again, and then the next day he says, I'll give you the decision, come. But we felt that there was already a move to delay the decision on the application for prohibition. So when the next day when we went, again the same thing. There was no decision coming. And that was a Saturday, and close to noon, we were told that this matter is going to be adjourned to the Monday. And we had already got information from the reporters that the tribunal was almost ready with their report and will be out maybe even before the end of the week or Sunday itself. So that's how it turned out.
Right.
We could perceive, and there were plans. The federal court, the Supreme Court was sitting in Kota Bharu. There could have been one or two Supreme Court judges in KL. We anticipated we have to do something more. Just not an appeal, maybe even something more than that.
Right. So basically, filibuster by masterly inactivity. Right. Now, turning to you now, Tommy, on the back of what Dato Varghese George has just told us, how did the team arrive at the conclusion that the only resort you had was an application to the Supreme Court? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, actually, we didn't think of it at the initial stage. As Varghese just said, we knew that there would be problems first before Justice Yusof and then Ajaib Singh, because we knew that they had to delay the proceedings, these judicial review proceedings, sufficiently so that the tribunal could reach its decision. So it's a race against time.
Right.
Two parallel proceedings going on. So we knew that, and they knew that. And of course, by Thursday or Friday, they knew we were going to court. So that was the game plan. We thought that Justice Ajaib Singh would make a decision, and then we would fly off to Kota Bharu, because we had heard a panel sitting in Kota Bharu that weekend. But the plans changed because Justice Ajaib Singh was even slower than we expected. Because don't forget, this is a leave for judicial review.
Right.
Ex parte, and it was ex parte, meant to be 5-10 minutes. And by then, the case law was very clear, and all the judges were very experienced. At the first phase, you're out of there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So what was supposed to be a 5 minutes proceeding went on all Friday and then all Saturday. And then Saturday, he said at about Varghese left about 11:45. He said, "Come back on Monday morning because I want the Attorney General to be present." Which is not surprising because you can get the AG to come in, but you should have told us that on Friday morning. So that meant we could come back on Monday, and that's when we heard that the Supreme Court was sitting. The judges were back in the corridors of the court, and we rushed.
And this is the old Jalan Raja, of course, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
right. The beautiful building.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem was how to get the Supreme Court interested in jurisdiction, because as you know, it's not finished yet. The matter is still before Justice Ajaib Singh.
Yeah.
It's not completed.
Yeah.
And we are rushing to the Supreme Court. So, and we had to think of all this in half an hour, 1 hour, because we were before the Supreme Court at 1 o'clock. But Justice Yusofi Abdul Qadir solved everything.
Okay. Anyway, we'll turn that question over to Wilson. Thank you, Tommy.
Going at the back of what Tan Sri Tommy just mentioned, Dato Darryl, could you then tell us how did the team end up before the 5 Supreme Court judges at 12:50 p.m. on a Saturday, 2nd of July 1988, when you didn't have an appeal before the court?
Right. I believe when Justice Ajaib Singh didn't decide, an application was made for an interim stay, and that was refused. And I think that was the basis that brought us to the federal court, the Supreme Court. And I think Raja Aziz saw Tan Sri Sulaiman with Dato Cyrus. All I knew was I was told and made aware that we were to be in the Supreme Court, and I carried all the bags, went up there, and I believed I was the first to arrive at the court, which was on the first floor of the Sultan Abdul Samad building, lovely building. So I waited there, and then I noticed there was no one on the corridor. I noticed Sophia Abdul Qadir coming down from the spiral staircase from across the court. He was fully robed. He crossed the veranda, and then he yanked at the door. The door wouldn't open. As a result of which, he rattled the door very hard. And then a policeman came running, a somewhat rotund policeman, and somehow he was holding his belt as though it was going to fall. So he came rushing, only to be met by a salvo from Yusofi saying, "Buka pintu." And he ran back, still holding his pants, ran back, and then Yusofi turned around and walked back up the spiral staircase. And then a policeman came, opened the door. So I brought in everything, all Nku's papers and all the papers, as juniors will recognize that's what we did, right? What's what we do. So when we got into court, laid out all the papers, and in those days, Unku needed to have at least 4 copies. 1 copy would be given to him the day before, that is his notes. When he arrived in court, he would ask for his notes, whereupon you'll have to give him another one, the same one. And then as he works out his papers, arranged everything, he will say, "Where's my notes?" And it's a third one. So then he's ready, completely ready. He stands up and he's lost it again. So that's when the 4th notes. I think Robin Choi say he can verify if that's true. That was Raja Aziz. So we sat down waiting. And then all of a sudden, an orderly appeared, bringing 4th chair. There were only 3 chairs in the court. So we thought, wow, there's going to be 4 judges. But it can't be 4. Is an odd number is required. Shortly thereafter, another chair was brought in. Wow. So we were elated. It was a bench of 5, strong, which was not common in those days. And I remember then the argument took place. And one thing very significant was Yusofi being the legalist, most legalistic among the judges. He was quite insistent that the court was exercising its its power under the old 137 of the Rules of the Supreme Court 1980, inherent jurisdiction, where the court's power to make any order, hear any application in the interest of justice may do so. So he was quite insistent that be made known and be recorded. So that's how we were.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Supreme Court.
Thank you, Darryl. So, Dato, let's take us into that courtroom on that Saturday, Dato Das, and on the 2nd of July, 12:50 p.m. on a Saturday. And by the way, courts used to sit on Saturdays back in the day. We used to actually have to work on a Saturday as well. Take us into that hearing and tell us from your perspective, when did it become obvious you were going to get that order?
Yes, those days, the courts well, people worked on Saturdays as well. Well, it happened this way. Things were being delayed rather obviously before Justice Ajaib. It was getting rather frustrating. We were called in, as it was just mentioned, late on Friday morning after Justice Yusuf put in a MC. And then Justice Ajaib was very anxious to know whether the papers had been served on the AG and whether the AG would be turning up. And then he adjourned it for lunch. We were called in at about 2:30. At that time, the legal team realized that this was just a case of filibustering and nothing is going to emanate or come out of his chambers. No decision is going to be made. And we needed to create a platform to go up. So the platform that we created was this, that Rajazis would apply orally for an interim stay, what we now call an ad interim, pending a decision by him. So he didn't come up into open court on Friday afternoon. So Rajazis and I went in and saw him in chambers, and we orally made that application that give us an interim pending the decision that you're hoping to make on Monday, the 4th of July. As Tommy said, at that time, it was getting pretty anxious because both proceedings were proceeding simultaneously, one at a snail's pace and the other at the pace of a fox, you know. And the other proceedings were over at Parliament House, whereas this was, of course, in the courts. And we realized after Tun Salleh received that letter to say that witnesses are to be called and you could cross-examine, that they were going to put in the report very quickly. Yeah. And so we had to move very fast. And therefore, after the platform was obtained by which you could go up to the federal court, the then Supreme Court, the events that Darryl mentioned took place, and they heard us. It was a panel of 5, presided over by Justice Tun Salleh, and it just took about 15 minutes.
Really? So when did the penny drop for you guys that we're going to get this?
It was even less than 15 minutes.
Wow.
What Rajazis did was to just stand up and say that this is what was happening. No decision is being made in the court below. Right. And it is a very simple ex parte application for leave to commence a writ of prohibition. And we are now into our second day. And what has happened now is that on Friday afternoon, after refusing the interim stay, he had directed that the papers be served on the Attorney General's chambers. He was told that it has already been served, but he insisted that the AG should appear. So under those circumstances, this was narrated by Rajazis, and they then decided, without actually adjourning, and they made the order. Wow. I wonder whether you would be interested in knowing that there was no seal available to seal the order.
Yes. Yes.
So
we're going to come to that in just a moment.
Well, let me know at that time.
Yes. We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
I'll tell you what really happened.
Yes.
Not in respect of the seal, but what actually was the official imprimatur on the order made by Tun Salleh.
Okay.
You'll be interested in knowing that. I think
with that, we'll definitely come back to Dato Das on that. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. Now, we now have the 5 Supreme Court judges sitting. Did it ever occur to any of you at that time that as a result of this sitting, this would then lead to the suspension and the subsequent tribunalization of the 5 Supreme Court judges?
Sorry, this is Porus's answer. I do not remember any discussion or exchange of views by the team about the consequences for the 5 judges, though there was frustration at Dato Ajaib Singh's handling of the judicial review application. I believe the decision to seek intervention of the Supreme Court was only made on the 1st of July 1988 at the earliest. In any event, I had an appeal in the Supreme Court on the Saturday, 2nd of July in Kota Bharu, and I flew off to Kota Bharu on the last flight on the 1st of July and only returned after the dramatic events on the 2nd of July, both in the Supreme Court and later at the Tribunal. And sorry, coming back to the issue of the seal, we'll be dealing with that in the second.
Yeah, in the second one. So we'll call upon you on that one as well. Right. So can I turn to Dato Varghese George now? And now, the Supreme Court, the 5 judges, they've given the order after 15 minutes. What was the mood like, A, within the team? And B, did it give you a sense of hope that, look, the judiciary was still there to put a check on the executive?
Okay, first of all, we were very exuberant, no doubt that we have got an order. And this was what we were working for. We did not have any break from morning, no lunch, no coffee, no tea. We've been waiting right through. So we were all very exuberant that we have achieved something. But as Dato Cyrus has pointed out, that was just the initial feeling. After that came all this rigmarole of getting the order completed, order sealed to be taken to the tribunal itself. So I think at that time, our focus was just in getting the order to stop the tribunal from submitting their report. We never thought of what's the implications as far as law or how it will work out or evolve in the days ahead as far as the 5 judges were concerned.
I can imagine that. Across to you.
Yes. Tan Sri Tommy, it would be useful to also hear from you, your perspective on the mood of the team at that time. That's my first question. Second question, could you also tell us what was the role of the bar at that time in defense of Tun Salleh Abas, and how important was the bar in his defense?
Well, the mood, I agree with Varghese. I think we were all absolutely thrilled. Finally, we got success, justice after about 3-4 days of hanging around. But we were also, or some of us were certainly conscious that there may be something terrible going to happen to the judges, which they themselves knew. Because don't forget, the political reality of Malaysia must never be forgotten. Because by then, I think everybody, Operation Lalang was over a year ago, and Dr. M's control was incredible. He was the power was very much centralized in his hands. And you knew that he was not going to start this process unless he was going to win. So you were worried that something terrible may happen to the judges, and I think they knew that. So that was certainly the view of some of us, that there's a mixed feeling. To answer your second question, I think, first of all, the bar, obviously the bar in 2 forms. First, individually, all the barristers who are here for the first Tun Salleh, and then secondly, for the 5 judges. So all in all, maybe about 25 lawyers and most of the law firms, they happily allowed their barristers to do it. And most importantly, people forget, other jurisdictions don't realize this, all pro bono. You cannot find any jurisdiction anywhere in the world where you find so many lawyers, experienced senior lawyers, starting with Raja Aziz, happily doing it pro bono, and that's never recognized, sadly, and I think we should emphasize that. That's at an individual level. And collectively, the Bar Council, the Malaysian Bar, rose to the occasion. There were any number of AGMs, and I think what I remember, that's the only time it's happened, there was applause when we entered Justice Ajaib Singh's court on Friday morning. The courtroom was full of lawyers, and they applauded when all of us walked in, and that was fantastic. So the bar was brilliant.
Okay. Okay. So sorry, just check your. I'm going to skip a couple of questions, but let me ask Darryl this, and then we're going to skip a couple of questions and come to the kind of full panel. The question that all of you, we want all of you to speak to. But before we do that, and I'm really interested in these kind of nitty-gritty things, as Dato George was just talking about getting the order, drafting it, getting it sealed. So I'm going to turn to Dato Darryl Goon, who was the youngest member of the team. I keep saying that. And I'm sure it was your task to get the order sealed and served on the tribunal. I know you have vivid memories of that, Darryl. So tell us about that.
That blasted order.
We can bring Dato
buried
on the
that
seal.
memory deep in the dark recesses of my memory. I didn't want to recall it, but I think I cocked up there. There were some spelling errors, then there were gaps. There were gaps in the order, about 3-4 spaces, big gap there, spelling of judges wrong. And I remember Justice Razak. It was Justice Razak who was instrumental in pushing for a complaint to be written to the Dato and the Sultans. Anyway, he was lurking around the corridor and was haranguing me and said, serve the order, serve the order. But I didn't have the heart to tell him that I've cocked it up, So I had to take the order back to office and to type, and it was really very stressful. As I can now appreciate, all juniors will at some point in
No,
time
you
go through all
don't.
that.
No, you do not. Don't lie, Darryl.
Anyway, went back, got the order sorted out, and I didn't know anything about the hiding of the seal. That was all behind me. And then what happened was, he then climbed into this vivid red Citroen. It was high noon at the time, just after that. That was Jojo's very vivid Citroen. 6 of us crammed into the car, and I don't know why we couldn't have another car.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just ask you, and was that the only Citroen in KL?
Sorry?
Was that the only Citroen in KL?
It probably was, but I believe he had 2. I think he had 2. So we all drove in that Citroen to Parliament, and I remember 6 of us in the car, and Unko sat out front, riding shotgun, and Jojo was driving, and I saw all the rest of us like Forrest was there, wasn't there? Right, and Forrest was, no? I know. They looked very uncomfortable and squished there, and we went there. So when we arrived, and of course I had to take out all the orders and start serving it on the tribunal members. They were quite polite. They quietly accepted it and walked away. Trailing clouds of glory, we went back. And only to find out 4 days later that it wasn't all that great after all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And the other thing that sorry.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There was another dramatic event when we were at Tun Salleh's house. We had to do something back in the office, so we wanted to call back the office. We used his telephone, but none of his phones could work. And then so happened to have this Ator, our Malaysian first portable telephone. It was the size of a car battery, as heavy as well. And even that couldn't work. So whereupon, we jumped into Tommy's vivid red Mitsubishi Stereo. 2-seater. And he drove like a madman, went back to Tangsi, which is at Bank Rakyat. That's where my firm was then. And all the typing was done there. The unfortunate thing was, right on top, we were on the 18th floor in Bank Rakyat. And on the 19th was the Aegis Chambers. And we very quickly decided to move to Shuklin and Bog. And that's where ultimately we worked out of.
Yeah, thank you. So just before Wilson jumps in, so what we're going to do now, there's a couple of questions we've got to skip in the interest of time and offering you guys an opportunity to ask questions. There are 2 general questions we're going to ask of the panel, for all of them to say something. But guys, we've got to keep it really tight on time. Thank you. Wilson, go ahead.
Yes, this is a question for each of you. Now, in acting for Tun Salleh Abas, it was against not just the backdrop of matters involving the judiciary, but also Operation Lalang, or Operasi Lalang, the infamous detention by Dr. Mahathir of his political opponents. Every one of you in the team were essentially taking on the machinery of the state at that time. My question, did it concern you that the state might use those same powers against you? And did any of you have any concern of the effect that this may have had on your professional future? And nevertheless, why did you do it? We'll start off with Dr. Das.
Before I answer that question, I must mention this. When Tun Salleh later was to come and write about the events that happened to him, he described the decision of the then Supreme Court, the 5 judges who sat and exercised their inherent jurisdiction power on the 2nd of July of that year. He described it as, quote unquote, the finest moment of the Supreme Court. You'll find that mentioned. You'll find that mentioned in his book, Mayday for Justice. And why that is important is because, as you all know, and I think this will be covered by the second panel, 2 judges never really came back to sit on the court at all. So we must always remember that it was the finest moment of the Supreme Court, which has now vanished and it is now the federal court. The other thing is this, that the seal went missing. When the seal went missing and Darryl was asked to look for it and couldn't find it because it was locked up, Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman said, bring the order to me and I will personally sign it. And he personally signed it. And then he knew that without the order or without the seal, there will be difficulty in enforcing that order. So what he then did was, he called I'm not very sure about this, he called did he call the IGP? Yes, so he did two things. He informed them that there is this order of the Supreme Court. And number two, to facilitate us access to the Parliament House to serve it on the tribunal, the red car was not enough. He actually arranged for the guards through the police to give us access. So these were the things that they took.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Now-
the danger to you? Yes.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
coming back to your question, nothing heroic in all that we did. As one of us mentioned, when called upon, I think we just all saw that this was something very important. And it was very much an effort by the Bar Council itself. And in this, let me just also mention this, if you'd permit me. There were two persons behind the scenes who were very, very instrumental in putting together the legal team. Because the legal team, insofar as the legal team is concerned, it was not the whole lot of us who were appointed by Salleh Abas. It was Raja Aziz who was appointed by Salleh Abas. But the legal team was put together by these two persons, very active behind the scenes, right through to the time, up to August when Tun Salleh received the letter of dismissal. This was Dato Param Kumaraswamy, former president of the Bar Council, and the late Mr. GTS Sidhu, who was at that time the current president of Law Asia. And apart from the Bar Council convening an EGM, Law Asia on that day participated in the EGM because Law Asia was also having an EXCO meeting, and so they participated in it. So we had the full backing of these two great organizations, the Malaysian Bar Council and the Law Asia. So nothing heroic on our side. We just accepted the request that we form part of the legal team to assist Raja Aziz. So that's my answer to you as to how we got in.
Who's next?
Thank you. Dr. Varghese George?
There wasn't any apprehension on my part when there was a demand to stand up and be counted. I was prepared to go, but family, others around you, they were more apprehensive of their role, especially after I was involved in the Operation Lalang cases, and I was still defending two detainees, particularly for religious reasons at that time. But I must pay tribute to my boss, Encik Zain Azhari, the late Encik Zain Azhari. He had gone to see Tun Salleh and Dato Param. And Dato Param is the one who then asked Encik Zain whether he could spare me to join the team. And that's how I got into the team. So not so much we were worried. I know there was a God above who knows what you are doing, and you are not doing something wrong, you're doing what is right. That was the confidence I had.
Dr. Darryl? Yeah.
Yeah, I was very young then, so I had nothing to lose. So it was all very exciting for me, and that was most important, I think. But I was brought up, if you're doing right, don't worry about being wrong. But I must confess, I did tell Miss Fu Yet Mo that if I were to be taken in, instruct Manjit Singh Dhillon. That was basically it.
Always good to have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Tan Sri?
No,
Okay. Short and sweet.
nothing to add on. Just no.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to now just two last questions before we can open it up to the floor. And Darryl, you can keep this short but punchy. You were known as the Pisang Goreng Gang. Why was that? And give us a sense of the dynamics. Give us a sense of what it was like working a day in the life of Tun Salleh Abas' team.
Well, it wasn't me, it was the team. Don't you think? Now, but actually, I don't recall the pisang goreng thing, but I think it was really the curry puff team. And it was Tommy who was responsible for that. Because I know that when we were working at Shuklin and Borg, Cyrus took care of us very well. There was always food brought in. So there was curry puffs and tea and me mama continuously flowing. So that was very good. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
So it was more the curry puff, like curry puff.
Curry puff.
We used to say curry puff tea, something like that, rather than me.
Okay, all right, okay. So just before we turn to the last question. Yeah, yes, of course, Tommy. Yeah.
There's a sequel to that. You forgot how you and I managed to charm Tun Salleh's wife, Puan. So when Cyrus and Raja Aziz were seriously talking law with Tun Salleh, Darryl and I would walk in the kitchen and talk to
Puan.
and then she started making pisang goreng for us.
So it was Pisangari. Okay, so just before I get to Wilson, 30 seconds from each of you. I mean, this is really, I think, one of the at the heart of what we're doing here today. So, constitutional crisis in 88. Have we recovered? That's a dust.
Well, I remember vividly, this was after the Saleh dismissal, which came in on the 8th of August of that particular year. There was an informal gathering in Lake Club where Tun Sufyan was speaking. It was very informal. It so happened that a group of lawyers, Param, myself, Raja Aziz was there, and somehow or other we were gathered there. And Sufyan said in his usual sage-like voice, he said, "Gentlemen, it will take at least 20 years, 30 years?
30 years.
Yes, for us to get back to what we are." And we thought that was pretty long, but he turned out to be very right. And I think under our present Chief Justice, we have gone a long, long way in restoring the former glory that the Malaysian judiciary enjoyed. And you all know, you're all very familiar with the contemporary and current events, so you can make up for yourselves your mind on what's happening.
Tommy.
Well, I think the 30-year lifespan turned out to be so accurate. And so...
Can I ask you, what was that based on? I mean, do you think there was any... It's like a generational thing. It was a generation.
Sufyan just...
Right.
Sufyan just mentioned 30 years. Plucked it from the air. In a sense. We all thought it would take some time because the Hamid Omar bunch of judges will be taking over and they were all promoted very quickly. But to think of 30 years was prophetic. But I think I want to add on to what Cyrus says. The Chief Justice, under Chief Justice Tunku Maimun, the last 6 years, which would have been, I think, probably after the 30 years, we've done really well. But as the current debate shows, who knows what is going to happen in the future?
Right.
I would say it's always very fragile. The independence of the judiciary and civil liberties and democratic space is always very fragile. It requires constant vigilance, and only time will tell.
Thank you, Tommy.
My only comment is this, that immediately after that 1988 incident, things were very bad. It went downhill all the way until we had the Royal Commission of Inquiry on the Lingam tapes. Until then, it was really bad. Then, with the advent of the Judicial Appointments Commission, JAC, and new set of judges, we are in the process of recovering independence, the standing of the judiciary as such. But as Tommy says, this is a very fragile, very challenging time, and we should all be aware. Let me also just add one other thing. In 1988, I think there were only about 2,000 or 3,000 lawyers, not the number of lawyers that we have in the bar at that time. Most of them were concerned with conveyancing or with, banking work and things like that. Not so much constitutional issue. But that incident did bring up an awareness as far as fundamental rights, as far as the separation of powers, role of the judiciary, and so on. So the incident was an enlightening moment as far as the history of this country is concerned. We went down, but we are coming up. We hope it doesn't tilt any other way.
Thank you. DG.
It depends on what you mean by whether we have recovered. if you take whether we have recovered to mean whether the fear or the concern of executive reprisal continue to exist, whether it disappeared earlier, I think it did. I think the judiciary recovered. Otherwise, we would not have seen the basic structure see the light of day. Author is with us. Yeah. Yeah. And, so I think we have recovered, but let's clear about it. Independence of the judiciary is very fragile. I remember the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of India, saying that they can make laws, but somehow the executive does not carry them out. So it's the weakest. The judiciary is the weakest of the three organs. And that's something that we have to continuously be conscious of and to rattle the saber. That's all we can do. And of course, at the courts.
Thank you. Boris, you got anything to say?
I shall refrain from putting words in Boris' mouth.
Okay. All right. Last question
Last
from
question.
all of you from Wilson, and this is 10 seconds only.
10 seconds. Raja Aziz as the leader of the team. Tell us what you think about him.
He was an outstanding advocate and an outstanding leader of any legal team. I worked very, very closely with him on this case. This was my first experience working with him almost at his elbow. And I can say that he has been outstanding in every way, in giving leadership and also in strategizing. Because you see, we knew once the composition was announced that it was hopeless. And there was a big drop in morale. But he kept up our hopes. And he made it very clear that you work towards justice as an end in itself. And so I would describe him as an outstanding advocate and a leader. And it has been my great experience to have worked with him.
Tommy, do you want to go next?
Incredibly modest and very, very friendly, very down to earth, happy to have a beer or drink with anybody, really down to earth, and not a single ounce of arrogance or whatever. And the other thing is we forget that every time the bar was in trouble, we turned to him to be the president. So in 1987, 88, because of Operation Lala, my memory is that in 1988, March, he became the president of the bar. So my memory is that when the judicial crisis happened in May 88, Unku was the president.
No, Devendran.
Or Devendran.
Yeah, Devendran. Yeah.
Before.
Yeah.
He became the president after.
After.
Oh,
Yeah, immediately after.
Oh.
Yeah.
Raja Aziz, we turned to Raja Aziz Unku at least 3 times from 1975 to lead the bar.
Yeah. Thank you.
My comment is only this. Raja Aziz, apart from being a good strategist, good advocate, he was a very composed leader. He never was agitated. He weighed the situation very carefully. He did not react to his juniors in any way, like getting frustrated with what was happening. He was so composed, so humble, that he would say thank you to you for whatever you did. That's the impression that he has left with me.
Never scolded me as well. Small in stature, giant of a man. Packed with character and genuinely, sincerely concerned about doing what is a true gentleman. And I wish members of the bar would have a fraction of his personality.
Right. Absolutely. Forrest, I'm assuming nothing to say there. So we've got literally 5-6 minutes for questions. Anyone have anything to ask? Yes, Ambika. Always the troublemaker. Yes. Sorry?
Okay, sorry to be a bore. I'll keep it short. The first thing I would say is I think a lot of credit goes to Param Kumaraswamy. He couldn't be here today, but I think we must pay tribute to him. Because don't forget, these were circumstances that never occurred before that. The background was ISA, was Operation Lalang, etc., etc. And as I recall, he was, I don't know, this was what we heard, that the first person Salleh Abas called was Param. I don't know if I'm accurate in saying that. Datuk Cyrus would know. Oh, who? So he called Raja Aziz and Param. So what does that say about the two giants, actually? So a lot of credit should go to him. The other thing, quick one I want to say is the bar actually, don't forget, this bar passed a motion of no confidence in Tun Hamid. Okay? We were not just sitting there not paying attention. And by all accounts, the bar liked Tun Hamid more than they liked Salleh Abas. Okay? Yes, he was very personable and very friendly with the bar, which is but the bar stood on principle. The third thing I want to say, and maybe can invite some comment, is that when you want to destroy an institution like that, you can't do it unless there are enablers within. I won't use the word traitor, but you know what? That's what I'm trying to say, right? You need enablers within to destroy the institution. And that, I think, you could see from how Tun Hamid behaved, etc. I'm not talking about judges who stayed in the background. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about active enablers. And if you have active enablers who want to undermine the judiciary, it's very hard to fight, but fight we must. Thank you.
Yes, Fari.
Now that we are here, 40 over years later, what have we learned from that? And if such a constitutional kind of crisis happens again, what should we do? Because I feel something's coming. Thank you.
Okay. So let's throw that at Tommy.
Yes. For that, you need a brave bar, a brave council. So I don't know whether we have that. Where Raja Aziz and Morasamy and Ambigas. So yeah, we have to fight. And of course, we can do it much faster because we've got so much of experience. Yes.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll have to call it quits. Anyone? Put your paw up? Yes, over there. Bama.
This is not so much as questions, but anecdotal. 40 years of carrying this, 30 years of carrying this, wanting to share these stories, and I couldn't. But today I've got the chance. The Malaysian bar was brilliant. To all you young lawyers, you didn't experience that, but the way the young lawyers galvanized into action. I was only 8 months in practice. Me and my friends, we were there. We were at the bar room. Manjit Singh Dhillon came down and read the press statement. I had to read it because it was in Bahasa. So at that time, my Bahasa was fairly good. So I had to read it. All the lawyers came to the bar room at Sultan Abdul Samad building. And you know what happened? They reduced the size of the bar room because apparently that was a hotspot of rebellion. Okay? Luckily, they didn't say debauchery. You know, and then Ajaib Singh, we were all there. We sighed, we went, and we were maligned because they said we booed. I confronted the reporter who said, why did you say we booed? We didn't boo, we sighed. And I got a dirty look and he walked off. The young lawyers were amazing. We wore white ribbons around our black jackets, sign of mourning. We had badges, justice for the judges, save the seal.
Yeah.
And one that did not quite get off the ground, FCJ. We had that.
FCG.
I can tell you, Dato Varghese, you are not the foot soldiers. We are.
Yeah.
Because we were exposed to stories, to anecdotes. You know what we did? Always, young lawyers, I tell you a secret, go and make friends with the interpreter, the secretaries.
Okay.
They will tell you stories.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Young bar, meet Bama, Bama, meet the young bar. Okay, thank you so much. Guys, we're going to have to call this now. And can I just end it by saying this? These guys here, together with Unku and Porus and Zainor, got the 5 judges into a whole load of trouble. The guys who represented them are up next. Thank you very much.
Thank you.